Good afternoon and welcome to today's Planning for Adolescent School-Located Vaccine Events this spring, brought to you by the California Department of Public Health Immunization Branch this Wednesday, February 12th, 2025. As we move on to the next slide, my name is Leslie Amani. It's my pleasure to welcome all of our attendees and support our wonderful panelists today. Now, during today's webinar, we want to remind all of you that this is a webinar for you to ask your questions as you hear the updates and information. How do you do that? Find that Q&A icon. It might be the actual icon of a question mark or Q&A. When you click on that, you can open that and ask questions, make comments, or anything that needs clarification. We use the chat feature to drop links that we have included in today's deck. And of course, emojis are always welcome. So if you are ready to go, I see a thumb pop up. Give me the emoji of your choice. I'll know that the 150 plus of you can hear me as we move on to the next slide. And yes, I'm seeing all kinds of emojis there. So here's some information for you. We are recording today's session. And later, the webinar recording and other postings can be found on the school-located vaccine event webpage on the Shots for School website. Slides will be emailed to all registered attendees. So that will come a bit later. And then if you have post-webinar related questions, please email schoolvaxteam@cdph.ca.gov, and we'll go ahead and move right on to our next slide. And I am so pleased again to provide the welcome, but to provide the overview of agenda and moving on, I'm going to introduce Kate Holbrook. Kate, if you would run through the agenda and then you can turn it over as you're ready.
Thanks, Leslie. Welcome all. We're so glad to have you here with us. Today, we're going to provide an overview of school-located vaccine events, or SLVEs. We'll focus on events for adolescents, though the concepts apply to events for any age group. We'll review some immunization data for vaccines given in adolescents, as well as some data around SLVEs across the state. We'll share some very exciting resources that can be used to plan your events. But most importantly, we'll hear from 3 guest speakers across the state involved in school-located vaccine events for adolescents in their communities. We'll have time for a Q&A before we wrap up. So the audience for today is anyone who is interested in school-located vaccine events, including folks from schools, local health departments, healthcare providers, managed care plans, and community-based organizations. We are not, however, able to address questions about school immunization law or reporting today. We have included some resources at the end of today's webinar. So with that, I'll turn it over to Amy Pine so we can dive right in.
So much, Kate, and I am Amy. Good afternoon, all. I'm so grateful that you're here. I'm Amy Pine, and I co-lead the school-located vaccine team here at CDPH. And to start off, we want to make sure, if I could have the next slide, please, to just talk about. We want to make sure that everyone has a similar understanding of what we mean by a school-located vaccine event, or SLVE. And an SLVE is an event held at school where vaccinations are offered to the entire student body or a subset of the student body. They can come in a variety of shapes and sizes, and they involve different vaccines. There's no single right way to put them on. They can be events offering only flu vaccine, or they can be events offering multiple vaccines. Parents or guardians do not have to be there if they give their consent in advance. It is up to the organizers of the event to decide if they want the event to include just students or include other audiences as well. There's a wide range of models and a variety of partnerships and funding mechanisms to support these events. And as Kate said, today we're going to focus on SLVEs intended for adolescent students, but the concepts we'll discuss apply for any school-located vaccine event. Starting the planning process now will get you all set for events this spring. There's also a yearly observance called Adolescent Immunization Action Week. It is the week of April 7th through 11th. And if you wish to hold any events during that week, right now is the time to get started with the planning. Conducting adolescent vaccine events this spring that offer Tdap, HPV, and meningococcal vaccines can result in multiple positive outcomes. They ensure readiness for 7th grade advancement. They help meet the national recommendations of CDC and pediatric healthcare providers. They help health plans meet their quality metrics. They go beyond what is required of the California Cancer Prevention Act, and they keep students from getting and spreading disease. Now, can I please get a thumbs up or an emoji for those of you who have implemented or have been involved in some way with school-located vaccine events? Okay, this is good. How about SLVEs? How about SLVEs targeting adolescents specifically? Ooh, these are all wonderful emojis. Please feel free to share any pleasant surprises or wins that you have experienced in your events. Please share those with all of us in the chat. Today will be informal and we can cheer each other on. We're all in this together. If I could have the next slide, please. There are a number of benefits to providing vaccinations at schools, most of which you can read about here. The bottom line is that when you can immunize large numbers of students at once, there are economies of scale that benefit the student, the classroom, the school, the family, the medical provider, and the community at large. Plus, it's hyper convenient for families to be able to send their children to school in the morning, then have them come home from school immunized. That's amazing. And no one had to take any time off of work to make it happen. Next slide, please. We conducted a survey last year to local education agencies and other partners asking about immunization access issues in general. And most all of the issues that were stated in that survey can be addressed with school-located vaccine events. Schools are trusted sites in communities. SLVEs can reduce barriers to accessing vaccinations, such as transportation or caregiver work schedules. SLVEs address a lack of provider access in communities and can help take away the cost barriers for families. They can also help to ensure that students stay protected from disease and in school. These benefits are particularly important for our underserved communities, many of whom haven't even caught up from pandemic healthcare access issues. Next slide, please. Okay, now to get more real, I can tell you from personal experience that being present at a school-located vaccine event can be very joyful and make you feel uplifted and proud. But I wish I could tell you that they are easy to put on, because they are not. They take hard work, they take planning, problem solving, resourcefulness, and oftentimes thinking outside of the box. We are trying to put tools and resources in place to make things easier for you. We're trying to connect you wherever we can with different possible partners, but it is not easy work. And there are some aspects of our healthcare and insurance reimbursement systems in general that pose challenges. Also, just knowing where to start and who to work with as planning partners can be overwhelming. We have an action plan posted on our webpage that we hope can help guide the process, but also we encourage you to consider your existing partnerships, and particularly those that may have developed through navigating the COVID-19 pandemic, because those partnerships are good places to start. Vaccine supply is usually the largest issue. Vaccines for children, or VFC vaccine, can be used for eligible participants. Eligible participants mean students who are on Medi-Cal or are Medi-Cal eligible, who are American Indian or Alaska Native, who are under or uninsured. And vaccinating students who are not VFC eligible, particularly who are commercially insured or enrolled in an HMO, can be challenging. One option is to partner with a provider or pharmacy who has the capacity to bring privately purchased vaccine and to bill commercial insurance, although they still may not be able to bill an HMO. There is in California influenza vaccine that is state general fund purchased and can be used in anyone regardless of their insurance status, but it would only apply to flu events. Funding an event can be addressed with billing for vaccine reimbursement and or administration. Working with a partner who has this capability to bill all insurances will be the most helpful. If you are using VFC vaccine, staffing and supplies will be your main expense. Now, speaking of staffing, an event can be challenging as well. This is where partnerships, such as with a community-based clinic or even an academic institution, such as a school of nursing, can be helpful. Staffing registries are another option to tap into if you have the available funding or contracts in place for a staffing registry. Knowing in advance what to expect via pre-registration is also extremely helpful, but often also a challenge. Pre-registration involving paper, meaning photocopying the documents in different languages, distributing and collecting consent forms ahead of the event can be extremely labor intensive, and relying on the backpack method for paperwork to go home and then be returned back to school is not the most reliable method. However, for those interested in efficiencies from paperless electronic registration, the My Turn system, and I'll talk about that later in the webinar, can be used and is available to all of you for free. Each of the topics on this slide could be could be a webinar in itself. And we want to be transparent about the challenges involved with conducting SLBEs. With that said, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of amazing and resourceful partnerships happening all over the state as we speak. So the challenges are definitely not insurmountable. Okay, next slide, please. And that's it from me for now.
Thanks, Amy. And thanks for that great overview of school-located vaccine events. I'm going to briefly share some adolescent immunization data and some data on school-located vaccine activity in California. Next slide, please. So ensuring our adolescents are vaccinated with Tdap, HPV, and meningococcal vaccines keeps them in school, prevents cancer, and protects them from disease. Looking at our national data, we can see immunization coverage rates for the 3 routinely recommended adolescent vaccines for 13 to 15-year-olds in California. Not surprisingly, as it is required for school entry, we see Tdap with the highest coverage, followed by meningococcal vaccine and HPV series completion sort of lagging behind at below 60%. This data reflects why we emphasize including HPV vaccination when planning events targeted at adolescents, though all of these vaccines, of course, are important in preventing serious disease. Next slide, please. This data is from the Medi-Cal Managed Care External Quality Review Technical Report from the fiscal year 2022 to 2023, and it's reporting on IMA2 measure, which is a HEDIS performance measure. For those unfamiliar with HEDIS, measures they're used to assess how well a health plan is delivering quality care to its members. So this measure measures the percentage of adolescents who've received 1 dose of meningococcal vaccine, 1 dose of Tdap, and completed their HPV series by their 13th birthday. In the top table, you can see how plans, Medi-Cal managed care plans are doing across the state. And in the second table, you can see the regional variation in covered rates across plans. Looking at data from commercial plans in California, which isn't pictured here, rates vary from 23 to 67%. So bottom line is that there's room for improvement, and school-located vaccine events are a great strategy for improving adolescent vaccination rates in your community. Next slide, please. So to have a sense of the activity in California, Amy just mentioned dozens, if not hundreds. Well, over 1,800 events have been held in the last couple of years. So we do collect information about events on a survey on our webpage. It is administered through REDCap, which is currently unavailable. It's undergoing security review, but it should be up soon. So we really encourage you to submit your information. Anyone can submit information about their school-located vaccine event. In addition, for local health department work plans, all LHDs should report activities on this survey. But with that said, this data is just sort of what is reported, right? So it isn't inclusive of all events happening across the state. As I mentioned, over 1,800 events were held in the last couple of years with over 200,000 doses administered. About 34% of those events included at least one type of adolescent vaccine. So it included either Tdap, meningococcal vaccine, or HPV. And last year, we saw a number of events where all 3 adolescent vaccines were administered. So we're definitely seeing more school-located event activity for adolescents. I think the take-home point here is we do have the collective knowledge of how to do this. I'd love to say there's a magic bullet and one way to do it, but there's lots of different ways to do it. And we have folks in our state, in our county that we can learn from. Next slide, please. All right, here you can see a map of school-located vaccine events by county in the last 4 years. 2021 and 2022 were mostly COVID-19 events. 2023 were mostly flu events. But as we mentioned, we saw this uptick in events last year, and there were events in more counties offering more types of vaccines. So we'd love to see this strategy continue to increase in use, especially in places that may experience higher levels of vaccine access challenges. Now I'd love to turn it over to Kim and Amy to talk about some of the resources we have available to you to help with planning, implementing, and promoting your school-located vaccine events.
Okay, let's dive into the resources we've made available to you to support your SLVEs. Next slide, please. To access our resources, you'll visit the Shots for School website. Once there, simply scroll down and click on Conduct School-Located Vaccine Events. You'll then be taken to the new SLVE main webpage. We've outlined the two brand new promotional toolkit webpage links here in blue to familiarize you with their location, and Camila will be dropping the links in the chat for you to easily access. Next slide, please. Here you'll see examples of just a few of the SLVE resources currently available on our site. Most of these assets are familiar to you, but we do have a new vaccine series completion job aid spotlighting HPV vaccine. In addition, you'll find a new vaccination card, a Medi-Cal managed care plan job aid, and a very helpful partnership guide. Each year, there are approximately 13,000 students excluded from school in California due to missing and needed immunizations. Schools that become VFC providers can keep these students in schools, which also protects their ADA funding. So you'll find a new job aid that helps schools and districts become VFC providers. Please note CDPH assets are best downloaded using Chrome and Firefox, not Edge. Next slide, please. As mentioned already, there are two new promotional toolkits for you to utilize. I'd like to call attention to the Adolescent SLVE promotional toolkit. Messaging templates, banners, posters, and flyers are available to you with photos and content that are specific to the adolescent population. You'll also find a variety of social media assets relating to Tdap, HPV, and meningococcal vaccines. Every resource is available in both English and Spanish and offers customizable messaging and instructions for sharing. Next slide, please. As an HPV cancer survivor, I have a keen appreciation for the value of gaining an early understanding of HPV, the 6 cancers it can cause, and the importance of the vaccine that prevents them. The Cancer Prevention Act requires schools to notify 6th grade students and their parents and guardians to follow current HPV immunization guidelines before starting 8th grade. SLVEs prevent a natural opportunity to fulfill these requirements. Schools conducting events offering HPV vaccine can find more great resources on the California HPV Vaccination Roundtable and CDPH Cancer Prevention Act web pages. All right, to support schools and messaging requirements, we have a new adolescent infographic that can be used by school nurses, health teachers, and even providers in a wide variety of settings. You'll find this resource on our web pages in the coming weeks as it's currently in the final stages of being published. And that's it for me. I'll turn it back over to Amy.
Thanks, Kim. Here are two more. Oh, next slide, please. Here are two more resources that schools can use for free of charge that can play a role in school-located vaccine events. The first is the School and Childcare Roster Lookup Tool, or SQUIRREL, as we affectionately call it. SQUIRREL is a tool that communicates with the California Immunization Registry and says whether, based on what's in the immunization registry, a student meets immunization eligibility requirements to enroll in or enter school. SQUIRREL can be used to look up a single student, or it can accommodate rosters of up to 4,000 students at one time. And for each student you submit to SQUIRREL, it will tell you whether that student is complete and can enter school, is conditional, meaning they can enter school, but will still require some follow-up from you because they have not yet received all required doses, and which students are overdue and should not be allowed to enter school. SQUIRREL only looks at immunizations associated with school law, but the idea is to make things easy for you to understand the status, the school immunization requirements, the status of students. MyTurn is a statewide clinic management and appointment system that any of you can use for free. School events that you plan can be posted on MyTurn in a private manner, such that only families from your school can access them, or in a public manner such that anyone can find them by searching the MyTurn tool. It's whatever you prefer. Families can register their students in advance and consent to immunizations for their minors. MyTurn can also accommodate advanced registration in 16 different languages. Clinics that are set up in MyTurn automatically communicate with CARE as well. That's the California Immunization Registry. So any administered doses are documented in the statewide registry, which is actually a law in California. And there are links on this slide on where to find out more information for both systems. Next slide, please. Now, the purpose of this slide is simply to exist as a visual representation of everything we've discussed so far in this webinar. that the process of SLVEs can be circuitous and challenging, but also quite rewarding. It's a representation to dive in and get started and use the resources on our SLVE web pages of the Shots for School website to help plan and decide your clinic details. Then take a roster of your sixth graders and put them into Squirrel and see who's missing a TDAP according to CARE. Invite anyone missing a TDAP to your event. Use the assets and templates in our Adolescent Promotional Toolkit to market your event and let them know that they'll be able to get HPV and meningococcal vaccines as well. Create a URL for your event in My Turn so that families can use paperless registration and sign up their students in advance. You can then continue to market your event using our assets, monitor your signups, and get a ton of interest, and then you hold your event and you vaccinate everyone safely without their parents present and ensure that everyone leaves with a record of what they received. And then you bask in the glow of all of the wonderful work that you just did for the students, their families, and the world in general. And again, there are many ways to do these events. We're happy with whatever strategies you choose. Next slide, please. We've now shared a basic overview of SLVEs and some of the resources available to you that we encourage you to use. You are putting questions into the Q&A and you shared questions in advance too, some of which are listed here. We hope that we have started to address your questions. We will continue to do so in the Q&A, and it's likely that you'll get some good nuggets of information from the next presenters. I'll now turn it over to Kate to introduce our wonderful guest speakers. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. I am thrilled to introduce several speakers who have been implementing school-located vaccine events, focusing on adolescents on the ground. We have about 5 minutes to hear from each of them, and then we will have an open Q&A afterwards where you can ask questions live. So any questions where you want to raise your hand, you'll see that function's disabled. We'll enable it in the Q&A. You can still continue to enter questions by writing them in the Q&A box, but we'll hold those live questions until we've heard from all three. So first I'd like to introduce Trina Ulias. If you can go to the next slide, please. Trina is the supervising staff nurse for the immunization clinic in Napa County, as well as their immunization coordinator. And with that, I will turn it over to Trina to share about the activities in Napa.
Great slide, by the way. I love the air balloons. Hi, my name is Trina Ulias, and I am the immunization coordinator and supervising staff nurse for Napa County Immunization Clinic. I've been working with the immunization clinic for just over 24 years, and I transitioned as the IZ coordinator about 6 years ago. And for the last 4, I've been the supervisor for the clinic. Napa County has some history of running annual flu clinics at school sites for over 10 years. So we weren't so new to this. We kind of already were doing it a little bit prior with our flu clinics, just at a smaller level, of course, and it was only based with flu. So this whole idea of, school located events really grew during COVID, and the need for students to have their required vaccines in a not so normal time. As we all may know, a lot of schools, they still have the school requirement, they still needed to do school reporting, but these kids were attending school remotely and things were not so normal, but they still have those requirements. So with this being said, next slide, please. We started off really slow by having some drive-through clinics at the middle schools. And so these are just a couple pictures, one being in the front of a school office, and we kind of just set up some tents and our little rolly carts and set up stations, and we knew students were just going to roll through. We did work with our school nurses, though, ahead of time, so we knew these students who were coming to us ahead of time. So we had a line list. So we already knew what their immunization record looked like by looking them up in the care registry ahead of time. So it was, we were ultimately trying to avoid vaccinating a student who did not need a vaccine at this time. And then the second picture is where we're kind of under one of those solar panels, because that's how that parking lot for that particular location is. So we didn't set up tents, we just got our little rolly cart. And same idea, we have a line list at each middle school of the students that we're going to see. So, having these clinics as what was presented earlier, it's really reduced barriers for parents who have transportation issues in our county, maybe with parents' schedules. And so for that reason, we always conducted our clinics from 3 to 6 p.m. because usually this is when it would work best for parents, and maybe they were already picking their kid up from the after school care program or just after school. So we're catching them at a time that really worked for them. As time moved on and, we get into other years that have passed, the clinics really transitioned to where we transitioned to use those sites that we already formed relationships to then give COVID vaccines along with our Tdap vaccines. And then since, those sites have grown, next slide, please. This is just a quick pitch of our actual immunization team here. On the right side, we're a small but mighty team of 4 nurses due to the privilege of having some COVID funds. So I can't say that we'll be 4 strong after this fiscal year, but I can say at least we've done a lot during this time frame. But with the transition of us moving forward, you can see on the larger picture, this is at one of the middle schools. Once we actually were now in person, kids were back into school, but the needs for having the vaccine was still there. But we upgraded at this point. We got more used to giving multiple vaccines because we were giving COVID and Tdap and flu when we first were beginning out. So then we started to say, hey, you know what? I think we're ready. We can do meningitis, we can do HPV and our Tdap. And so that's what we've been doing for the last few years with really good uptake of that. What I will say is that because, our primary allotment of vaccine is VFC, we provide HPV and meningitis for those who are VFC eligible. And what we do for those that we are unable to vaccinate on site for those vaccines, we really give them a strong recommendation to follow up with their provider along with informational handouts so that they can read up on it, be informed, and really make that informed decision to return back to their provider for those vaccines and for the student. So what I will say is our main partners in all of this have really been our school districts and the school nurses. Napa County actually has more than one school district in the county. The other districts tend to be very tiny though. So in our main district, we work with our school nurses and partner and coordinate how we're going to run these clinics with them. For our smaller districts, it's really kind of usually the family liaison for that school. It could even be such a small district that it's actually the school principal. And for that, because it's only one school and it's out really, really remote. But I would say those are our main contacts when we do these clinics. My recommendations, if you were just starting this out from scratch and from the ground, but it sounds like a lot of you have kind of ran through the trenches and worked this along the way too. I think COVID has really given a lot of us all of that experience. But for those of you who would be starting from scratch, what I would recommend is finding out, who is your person, your resource person at your school districts that you can talk to, and you can coordinate things like this and what the needs are for the school themselves, which you might have already heard from the schools, but what are their needs and how they can help and how you guys can coordinate together depending on what is really available to you, meaning, what kind of staff do you have available at your resource and what staff do they have at their resource that you can work together. Hopefully I'm not getting that time. The other thing I would say a big deal, and I know this was mentioned in one of the questions, is an MOU with the school district and your county. Normally, this is something that the school district will do. Will actually write up the MOU. And what you're going to do is run that MOU through your either county council or your contracts within your county. and for them to look it through and to see where they want to change or update, but have them do that. You kind of hand it over to them. I've never really been involved in the MOU. I let others do it. I have that blessing, I would say. The other thing is knowing whether or not your school sites want a certificate of insurance, so a CIO. That's usually a big one. Not all districts actually require it, so each of your areas, it may vary depending on the school site. And get to know, if you don't have necessarily the resources to do it all yourself, get to know your nonprofit organizations, the pharmacies around you, any other community partners that could get involved so that they could help out when it comes to nonprofit, when it comes to the privately insured children that you may not be able to vaccinate. And I say this because we did also work with Adventist Health, and they helped us when it came to working with the privately insured students. Some things I've learned really quickly is know your demographics ahead of time. I say this because I really didn't realize how strongly our Vietnamese community was in one of our districts. And knowing this ahead of time helps for you to be prepared to have what you need ahead of time when it comes to handouts and having the language line accessible to you when you're off site. And another big thing I would say is Wi-Fi. Really good Wi-Fi or some resource that even if you're using the school's Wi-Fi, if they would allow you, so that you can look in the care registry to ensure that you are not vaccinating a student that already has received a vaccine. And I say this because every year we always run into at least 1 or 2 students that believe that they need the vaccine. They've been signed up for the clinic and they actually do not, because we find them in the care registry and they've been vaccinated already. And this
Trina,
brings me
thank you so much. I'm sorry. It pains me deeply to have to interrupt, but I think that was super helpful. If you have any last tidbits, and then we're going to move to our next speaker, but certainly we'll have you available for Q&A. Awesome. Thank you so much, Trina. If I can get the next slide, please. I'd love to introduce our next speaker, Lindsay McGee. She's the Vaccine Preventable Disease Supervisor from Long Beach Health and Human Service Department. And with that, I'll turn it over to Lindsay.
Hi there, thank you. I'm Lindsay. I'm the Vaccine Preventable Disease Supervisor with the Long Beach Health Department. In my role, I oversee our mobile vaccination team. Our mobile vaccination team, we work closely with community-based organizations, early childhood and education centers, and also schools to bring vaccines directly to community members. In our work, we utilize vaccine from the State General Fund, Bridge Access, VFC, and then we also partner with a private pharmacy. So they allow us to really expand who we're able to reach. Our goal with our team is to increase our reach in communities and just really continue to identify different barriers to vaccination and make sure that we're doing really everything we can to effectively address those barriers. In our outreach and our work, we, really focus our efforts in areas that have historically low vaccination rates and also areas with higher rates of disease as well. In terms of getting started with hosting your own school-located vaccine clinic, we first did one 2 years ago. That was the first time. And we just started by reaching out to the LBUSD district nurse just to kind of put our feelers out and let her know, we want to try and provide Tdap or varicella at some middle schools. What does she suggest? So the district nurse connected us to a couple different principals, and they expressed interest. Yes, they would love to have us, and connected us with the school nurse. So the first year we shared a flyer that was disseminated to families through an online newsletter. We provided Tdap and the turnout was okay, but it wasn't great. We offered vaccines at both pickup and drop off. And so we weren't really sure if we were going to do it again. But this past May, we actually had these schools reach back out to us, wanting us to come out. So this time around, these schools had compiled a list of students that they knew were behind on vaccines. And so that was really, really awesome because we were able to provide the school nurses with some materials and kind of language to share with those families, letting them know when we would be there, at the school, day and time, what vaccines we're offering, and that if their kids are, uninsured or on Medi-Cal, they can have them get vaccinated at pickup. So we had a lot more success this past May with the nurses doing kind of that specialized outreach to those identified students that were behind and either needed to catch up for that year or just get them ready for the following year. So as far as recommendations go for hosting your own school-located vaccine clinic, one thing I would say for sure is plan it for the end of the year with the intention of getting students ready for the following school year. I would also say work to provide, materials and language and outreach to the school nurses or whoever, at the school to make sure that you get the messaging out before the event. And then, as far as what not to avoid, like I said, we didn't really have a lot of luck vaccinating at drop-off time in the morning, but at pickup, parents seem to have a lot more time and were a lot more kind of open to, even if they weren't ready to get vaccinated, there was more time and opportunity just to have some conversations and dialogue with parents, which was really, really beneficial. And yeah, overall, those are kind of our biggest takeaways and recommendations for hosting your own school-located vaccine clinic.
Great. Thank you, Lindsay, for sharing. Appreciate you being here today. And again, all of our speakers will be on for Q&A. I just responded to a question in the QA about contacting these speakers. If you can just send an email to our email address, schoolvaxteam, and that's in the slide in multiple places. If we can't connect you with these speakers, we have lots of other folks that we can connect you with who are doing this work. With that, can I have next slide, please? Great. I'd love to introduce you to Kelly Pagan. She is a school nurse from Enterprise Elementary School District in Shasta County. And I think they've got a really unique partnership. So I'm excited to have her here to share how they've been both organizing and funding their school located vaccine events. And I'll turn it over to you, Kelly.
Great. Thanks, Kate. Hi, everybody. Yes, I'm Kelly. I'm up in far Northern California in Shasta County. And I work at an elementary school district. And a few years ago, we were doing a big overview of our immunizations, sort of right post-COVID and SB 276 and SB 277. And our health department looked at our vaccine rates, incredibly low. And we just thought, man, how can we address this need and how can we make it easier for our parents to vaccinate their kids? And of course, the most logical answer was, hey, we want to do vaccine clinics, but where do we start? So kind of luckily, we got invited to join the Northern California Immunization Coalition, and that was a real luck for us because we got connected with Amanda, who is with Partnership Health Plan, who's our administrator of Medi-Cal benefits up here, and she's a huge champion for these things also. And so we just started meeting together and said, hey, we want to do this. How do we make it happen? And it was sort of a one step at a time. I really like, I know it looked busy, but that slide, that was a few slides ago, that was the big long circle of things to do. I could have written that myself. We kind of did the exact same thing. So we just started at the beginning. We set our bar really low for our first event because we had never done that before. So we thought, okay, we're just going to target the sixth graders, the graduating sixth graders, incoming seventh graders. We're going to offer Tdap vaccines. And okay, where are we going to get the Tdap vaccines? How are we going to pay for this? It is a huge priority to us that everybody can participate. So all insurances we need to be able to accept. And so we just really had to use creativity to find different partnerships. At the last minute, our school district actually told us, sorry, you can't do it on our campuses. We're not ready for that. So very last minute, we had to find a new location. And so we talked to our federally qualified health center and said, hey, do you guys want to partner with us and do this? So that first event was in 2022, and we vaccinated over 50 kids. And we just offered the Tdap and then just a handful of random like COVID vaccines and things like that. But and then so that felt very successful. It was a lot of work but there was a lot of room for improvement. So we went back to the drawing board right away and started looking at, okay, how can we improve this? Some of our partnerships just didn't feel sustainable. What can we do differently? And so along that road, as we're brainstorming what we can improve, we, again, very luckily got connected with a private pharmacy here who's owned by a woman that also shares the passion for this. So our team was just comprised of people who passionately care about vaccinating our community, and it was really it really showed. So the owner of this private pharmacy, it was participated in a pilot program to become a VFC provider. I think one of the first 10 in the state that was able to do that, or 3 in the state, I'm not exactly sure. And that solved a lot of our problems. She was just a huge champion for us and our events. So that she could provide, instead of having to piecemeal, okay, you're going to provide the VFC stock and you're going to provide the uninsured stock, and because that's how we did it at first. We had different lanes for different insurances, and it was kind of a mess. And this really solved that problem. So moving forward, we partnered with her, and she's able to do all of our vaccinations from all the different stock. We also got our school district on board, and so we can host the events on our campuses now, which just exponentially increased our numbers. And then the final layer that we added in this last year was the nurses went around to the 6th graders and did a quick lesson in their science classes about your immune system and immunizations and HPV and cancers. And we were able to educate the students themselves on all of these vaccines. And then we handed out individualized packets to each of our kids that said, here are the vaccines that you need for school, and here are the vaccines that that are recommended for your age. And we incentivized those packets being returned, so that even if the kids weren't going to participate, if they brought back the packet, I know we mentioned earlier that like sending packets home isn't really effective, but we incentivized it and we monitored their as they came back in. And so we made sure that we collected all of our packets. We also made phone calls and text messages, and we really strongly advertised these events. And so our most recent, our very first, I should say, school-based event targeted at the 6th graders, we vaccinated over 100 6th graders. And of those over 100 6th graders, over 80 of them got HPV and meningococcal, which was obviously optional. So we were really, especially up here in very conservative Northern California, we were blown away at the acceptance rate of the HPV and meningococcal. We're just so thrilled with those results. And the other thing I wanted to point out really quickly is we, of course, we had open doors. Parents, you're welcome to come if you want. And only 2 parents of over 100 kids showed up. And that just meant so much to me and our team, because it really showed that they trusted the work that we were doing. They appreciated the convenience of having it at a school. I should reiterate, it was completely free to all students, regardless of insurance status. And it just was a really effective clinic that we ran. So then so we're kind of in the cadence of fall back to school clinics for kindergarten and 6th graders or incoming 7th graders, and then a round of 7th grade, incoming 7th grader clinics in the spring for the Tdap and HPV. So that's sort of what we're sticking with right now, and it seems to be working really well.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. So glad that we were able to share what you all are doing, because I think it's such a creative partnership. But the nature of the business is they are all creative partnerships. So with that, if I can have the next slide, we're going to turn it over to questions. Our support can enable the raise hand function, but also we can look at questions in the QA. It looks like we're pretty caught up there. So any questions that anyone feels like they want to ask live? This is a safe space.
And yes, just as a reminder, as we're watching for those raised hands under attendees, you should have the ability to raise your hand and then we can unmute you, and that would mean turning your microphone from red to gray. Also, in case you missed it, we did announce at the top, we are recording this session, and later on this week, it will be available on the school located vaccine event webpage. The slide deck will be emailed to all registered attendees. So I'm not currently seeing any raised hands. speak up. All right, we can go ahead and I'm going to turn it back over to Kate. We're going to start with Kamlesh, and forgive me if I mispronounce your name. And then it looks like Alex got unmuted first. So Alex, I'm going to call on you. Kamlesh is on deck, and then move it over to V. So please go right ahead and ask your question. Alex, it looks like you're unmuted, and I'll keep asking until I hear some sound. I'm not currently hearing Alex. So Kamlesh, would you like to unmute and ask your question? Again, you have the ability to unmute yourself, turning your microphone from red to gray. Alex, looks like Alex is unmuted, but I'm not hearing anything. So V or Vi, and again, you guys can let me know if you want to unmute. All right, I see hands raised. I see you are unmuted, but I'm not hearing anything at this time. Again, I'm going to ask you to unmute if you have a question. Kate, while we're trying to figure out what's going on, not sure about that. Again, Alex, Kamlesh, and V, you raised your hands. Nirali, if you'd like to go ahead and unmute yourself, you have the opportunity before I turn it to Kate for any written Q&A.
Hello?
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay. This is a Kamlesh actually that we both listening. So this is a Kamlesh. Hello?
Hi,
Oh,
Kamlesh.
hi.
Yes, go ahead.
Go
I
ahead.
know. So no, Nina is my tech. She's my wife. So she's listening for her phone. I don't have. So I unmute myself, but I was listening to the, looking at my computer screen. So yeah, so I'm a pharmacist with TLC Medical Arts Pharmacy in West Covina. And we just being enrolled as a VFC provider as of September last year. And we trying to help the children in school. So I think I'm asking for the support. If there is a way I can get someone from the LA County or school district and help us to conduct the event at the nearby school in West Covina or La Puente, Baldwin Park. Yep.
Thank you, Kamlesh. We're
Yeah.
glad you're a VFC provider.
Yeah.
I think probably the best will be to email us, and we can try to connect you with the immunization coordinator. So our email address is in the chat, schoolvaxteam@cdph. Shoot us an email, and we'd be happy to try and connect you with some folks.
Yeah, that's what I try to do because I do like a SGF. I do provide at a pharmacy, the BAP, like pre-COVID. I almost did like 100 pre-COVID shot this season. So
fantastic. Thank you for your immunization efforts.
Wonderful. Thank you. And
All
we'll
right.
move to Liza. Liza, you're unmuted if you want to go ahead and ask your question. Not hearing anything. V or Vi, your hand is raised. I don't know if you intended to do that. I'm going to listen for Liza. Looks like everyone is muted again. So, Kate, why don't I turn it over to you? If there are questions in the written Q&A or pre-webinar registration questions you'd like to bring forward while I'll watch for further raised hands.
Sounds great. And I see one question in the Q&A about whether HPV and meningococcal will become a requirement. Not that to my knowledge, I wish HPV was. I think our whole team would wish that HPV become a requirement, but I don't think there's any current plans to make them requirements for school. Looking back at our questions that were submitted in advance, and speaking also, I think, to a question that came up pretty frequently around how do you manage privately insured individuals. And again, I wish, like all things, there was a magic bullet and I could say, you do it like this, but the biggest probably way to manage that is partnering with someone who can provide that private vaccine stock and bill. So that could look like a pharmacist, it could look like a private provider, but it won't handle kids who are HMO covered. So, the partnership plan in Shasta County is kind of interesting because they sort of provide a stipend for the pharmacist to offset any cost loss related to those kids. Those numbers tend to be very small in these types of events, but not negligible. So Another one I wanted to bring up from the submitted questions, how can Medi-Cal managed care plans help with school-located vaccines? We've had a number of plans reach out to our team and sort of talk about how do we get involved. I think that it can look like anything from providing funding or in-kind resources, so nursing or help with promoting event, to more sort of on-the-ground planning. It sort of varies based on sort of what the resources are, both for the Medi-Cal managed care plan and also for the partners on the ground. But I think just starting having those conversations, connecting either the local health department with Medi-Cal managed care plan or the school nurse or someone else in the sort of school health realm with the plan can help sort of talk about what some potential options are. And I think a lot of the resources that we provide on our webpage can sort of show you what are the things that you need to talk about. We did have a Medi-Cal managed care specific webinar, and if you're interested in getting that recording, you can email our team and we can provide it. It's not posted, but we can share those slides with you. Any more live questions?
So at this time, I'm not seeing any further raised hands. We'll loop back to what's written in the Q&A. Before I do that and turn that back over to Kate, I just want to check in with our presenters, Trina, Lindsay, and Kelly. Are there any other comments that you'd like to add since you began your presentation based on some of the questions or comments that have come in?
Yeah, I would be happy to add. I'm just looking at these questions here, and do you recommend holding it at the school? And just from very firsthand experience, our first 2 events were off campus, and then we were able to move them to the schools, and we did see a really large increase in participation. So I think any barrier that we can decrease to access is going to improve our outcomes. So up here, it's really difficult for our families to drive or take time off work or get to an appointment, or they might not have a car, or they might not be able to put gas in, whatever that barrier is. So definitely, if you can hold it, we had significantly more success holding it on campus during school hours. The kids were already there, the parents didn't have to come. Of course, we won't do that for our TKers and kindergarteners, but for these adolescent events on campus during school hours was very successful for us. And then what's the best way to outreach to schools? So the other nurse that I work with here in our district, we're just both huge champions for vaccines. And so we have the benefit of working here in the district. So we have the access, we are able to put that list together of kids who need it, and be able to personally reach out to each of those families, I think just makes a huge difference. If you just send a flyer home or post a flyer, everybody's going to ignore that. But getting a personalized phone call and text message and packet saying, hey, we're doing this, it's free, you can participate, that really improved our outcomes also.
Kelly. Currently no raised hands. I see Trina's popped up. Trina, go right ahead.
I was going to bounce off of Kelly as well, and she, hit a couple different things. I will agree the school site is more ideal for parents. I think it's just makes it easier for the families. But she also mentioned something in regards to, that the outreach. For us, if we didn't have that partnership with our school nurses, I don't know how our outreach, how well it would work, because they are the ones doing the phone calls. So they have the relationship with the families and the students. So they're making the phone calls. They're offering for them to receive the vaccine on the days that we're going to be there on site. And that's how we kind of get this line list going. And even if they don't make it, they can always make it to another school site. So we do that. I seen something in there on one of the questions in regards to that. So we might see students who maybe they didn't make it to our Redwood site, but they ended up at the Silverado Middle School, but we still end up seeing them at some point in time. But I also got on because I've seen that there was a question here in regard from Jean, curious on how students who needed additional vaccines to complete their series were followed to ensure the series was ultimately completed. If they're referring to a student who is like at one of these school sites and you're doing that, we actually will communicate with the parent that, your next dose is due at this time. And if it's within usually a 2-month time frame, we'll pull out our if we have time, we pull out our appointment schedule to have them be seen at our immunization clinic, and we give them an appointment at that time. So they already have it on site, or we just tell them a phone number to call us to make an appointment. And then the other thing, I know something was mentioned on here about individuals, and I was a part I didn't get to complete, and that is when we go to our school sites, even though we are outreaching for Tdap vaccine and we're doing meningitis, HPV, we're offering flu, we're offering COVID if it's that time of the year, and our flu and COVID are open to anyone. So it can be adults, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, whatever. That is open, and those are usually advertised on My Turn. And what I was going to say as the downfall for us is we find that not as many people actually sign up on My Turn for the other vaccines. They did really well during COVID, but they're just not as familiar with it when it comes to Tdap and other things.
Great feedback. Very quickly, Kate, for anyone, and thanks, Trina. Paula was asking, if you want to target back to school season, when would be a good time to start clinics?
I mean, I think there's two strategies, and I'll let Kelly, you can say when your back to school clinics are, but you know, you can either try to catch people as the school year is ending so that they're ready for the next year for Tdap, right? So then you know that you're not going to lose them over the summer. Or, you know, depends, schools start at different times, but you might, we've seen events happen like during registration week. We've seen events happen the weeks leading up. So it's sort of knowing your community in that sense. But Kelly, when did you do your back to school events?
Let's see, I can look at the dates right now. We started school usually like middle of August. So we did the first event we did on August 6th of 22, and then we did August 5th of 23 and August 4th of 24. So it looks like we kind of stick to that first Saturday of August. It gives the families about 2 weeks. Usually we start out somewhere around like August 16th. Usually a Wednesday is our first day of school. So it looks like we're tracking with the first Saturday of August, about 2 weeks before school starts.
Great, thank you. Leslie, I want to share just a few more things. So I think we're gonna need to move on from the Q&A, but please feel free, if any of your questions did not get addressed, please feel free to email us. We are happy to connect you with folks, to answer questions, to point you to resources. If I can get the next slide. Speaking of resources, we do have another webinar coming up in April. This webinar will be focused on schools or school districts who are interested in enrolling in the Vaccines for Children program. So if you are a school or a school district, maybe your local health department who wants to support schools or school districts in your county to enroll, then we encourage you to attend. At the end, we will also have someone from DHCS talking about the LEBUP billing program. So if you're a school that participates in that program and are billing for vaccines, there is a way to use care data to do that, to make it more efficient. We're all about efficiencies. So you can enroll. I think the link should be dropped in the chat. And then next slide, please. We mentioned so many resources today. They're in the chat. You're going to get these slides, but we put them all in one place for you. So if there's anything we talked about and you didn't catch it, it's here, or you email us at that first email address. I want to thank all of our speakers for taking time out of their day to share their experiences today. And like I said, if you would like to connect with them or other folks who are similar geography as you with similar resources, please reach out to our team. We are happy to make those connections.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you all. Yes, to reiterate, super webinar. Thanks for participating with your questions and your time and your attention and your attendance today. Our thanks to Kelly, Trina, and Lindsay today for joining, Amy, Kim, and Kate for presenting, and for all the behind the scenes support. We are grateful. And we'll move to the final slide, giving you a thank you. We do hope you register for that next April 9th session, if you would find that helpful. Good to come on again. But as Kate has mentioned, Please reach out to the school VAX team via email if you have any questions. They can connect you with the right information. And if they don't know, they'll work very hard as a team to get the information to you. Additionally, we have collected all of the questions that have come in today, so we will continue to review questions and bring forward the best information to support you as you help protect students from getting or spreading disease. So again, thank you. Our best to all of you. And with that, we will conclude today's session. Thank you all.